Hi, thank you for joining me today. My name is Sarah Flagg. I'm the Global Head of Sustainable Logistics here at Danco. And today I am going to give you a hopefully very interesting presentation on what I do here at Danco, which is work on helping our customers to integrate sustainability into their logistics supply chains. So I will touch on 4 topics. First is on how Danco views sustainability. The second is discussing how logistics sustainability is actually efficiency, and give you a few examples. The third, to talk about a few of the business and regulatory drivers around sustainability, and finally to talk about how to integrate sustainability into your logistics operations. But before we get into all of that, let's talk a little bit about the context of the world as it is today and how it will be tomorrow. So I don't think I need to tell anyone on the call today that the world is changing, and the world is changing very rapidly and sometimes in ways that are very unexpected. The populations of the world are growing, consumption patterns are shifting, wealth is being concentrated, and the way that we consume goods is changing. And how does that impact your business, and how does that impact sustainability? As I said, the population of the world is growing. By 2050, they estimate that 9 billion people will be on this planet, and that we will need the resources of 2.5 Earths to sustain. Obviously, we don't have 2.5 Earths, so we have to figure out how to do things smarter, more efficiently, how to waste less, and to also be able to give these people the same opportunities that others in the world have. So how does Danco then approach sustainability? Well, I think the first part is to explain who we are. So Danco is an end-to-end logistics company that is part of the Maersk Group. We work in many different areas, including my area, which is supply chain development, and work with many of the leading retail, lifestyle, technology, industrial mining, chemical companies around the world. So as such, we have set up our own sustainability priorities, which connect back to the Maersk Group. And the Maersk Group has a sustainability strategy that was published last year and is focused on 3 pillars, which are economic, social, and environmental. So our priorities are linked, but very specific to the industries that we work in. So as you can see, we are focused on anti-corruption, engaging in local community and development and diversity, environmental health, safety, and security, and then finally sustainable logistics, which is the core that I will be talking to you about today. We work with many different companies on our sustainable logistics services, which are focused in 2 areas. First, they're focused on providing end-to-end visibility and tools to allow companies to see how their business decisions are connected or have an impact to their sustainability performance. Second is working with companies to actually understand what that result means, what success looks like, what is good. And we do that through helping them to develop KPIs, develop strategies, and then actually figure out how those can then be integrated into logistics efficiencies. So moving into the sustainability as efficiency, I think the important thing that most people understand but don't quite understand the scale of is how mode selection impacts the sustainability and the carbon. So the energy intensity of each of the modes is quite different. As you can see from this chart, air freight is about 80 times more carbon than ocean freight. And how you end up making your decisions on which mode to choose, which carrier to select, how much packaging is shipped, and how effective you utilize your network and your equipment then also feeds into this. It's all connected into how much you use, how efficient your operations are, and how much you waste affects your costs and therefore affects your carbon. An example of this is a case study on the DC bypass, which you don't think of as a sustainability project, but actually, because you are increasing the efficiency, this will have a direct impact on how much fuel is consumed to move your containers from point A to point B. And what you will see here is that by cutting out certain activities within this supply chain, you're having an operational impact of reduced lead times, a cost impact of $10.5 million saved, and a carbon impact of 1,800 tons reduced, which is actually a significant amount. Another example is in CFS utilization. Again, not a sustainability project, one done for to gain operational efficiencies and cost reductions, but you'll see that it also has a significant carbon reduction. Now, what we tend to see is that you have a 1-to-1 ratio on these projects. I haven't included the percentages here, the relative percentages, but generally in the supply chain, if you can reduce your cost by 1%, you can reduce your carbon by 1%. So it's all tied back to how much fuel is consumed, what the efficiency of the network is, and how your logistics decisions then tie back to making sure that you're using everything as effectively as possible. This chart here is meant to illustrate that, yes, the different modes of transport have different energy intensities, and because air freight is so much more carbon intensive than, for example, ocean, you would think that globally it would have more of an impact, or it would have the largest share of the pie. But what this is meant to show is that while I'm talking about international end-to-end supply chains, there's also a significant amount of domestic trucking that contributes to the overall global picture. That said, just because ocean freight shows as 17% and air freight as 9%, you could look at this and think, well, that's not really a problem. I'll focus on road freight and figure out ways to make that more efficient. However, ocean freight actually globally represents, has the same carbon footprint as the country of Germany, which is the 6th largest emitter of carbon in the world. So this isn't a small scale that we're talking about, though small changes can make big impacts. So what are some of the drivers around sustainability? I'm going to touch on both regulatory and business drivers and give you an idea of what the challenges I see companies facing or influences to their decision making. Sustainability does continue to be on the executive agenda for logistics. What you'll see is that most CEOs do think that this issue is important, either extremely or significantly, but that there also are a number of barriers to why they are not pursuing this more aggressively than they currently are. The thing that I think is one of the largest barriers is understanding, and it's understanding that that a way to look at sustainability is not as a box that comes down and tells your operations how to work, but is used as a way to gauge the operational excellence of your supply chain and as a way of innovating new ways of reducing waste and reducing cost. As such, I do believe that sustainability is inherently embedded into supply chain goals. This chart is from 2010. However, I don't believe that many of the top goals have changed. I still hear reducing operating costs and improving quality as being one of the top or the top concern for many logistics managers. So again, going back to efficiency, going back to business excellence, essentially, this is where you can really make a good case of why should we look at sustainability within our supply chain. It is not something that is a capital-intensive investment that needs to be made. It can be purely out of reducing, getting up to do what logistics managers do every day, which is making sure that they run their supply chains in the way that's the most efficient as possible. And even reducing carbon footprint and greening the supply chain has become one of the areas as a goal for supply chain managers. So who are the companies that have been leading the way or really taking this agenda and integrating it into their operations? Mostly this has been with consumer-facing brands so far. And I think that is because these brands have very strong sustainability programs already. They have customers that are very interested in what choices that they make with their purchasing power. They want to buy from companies that are more environmentally, socially responsible. And they are global brands that have unique challenges. They want to get into new markets. This can be a competitive edge for them. So many of these companies have started out in a journey that I will walk you through in this next section on how you actually integrate sustainability into your logistics operations. And they have all decided to make commitments, public commitments, to reducing their CO2 in the supply chain. In conjunction with that, we also have carbon regulations and industry initiatives that are driving the agenda from a different angle. I've broken this out by mode of transport because most of the modes have their own ways of addressing the issue and ways of providing leadership. So to start with ocean, we have here listed the Clean Cargo Working Group, which is an initiative under the Business for Social Responsibility nonprofit, and it's meant to allow for ocean carriers in container transport to annually report their carbon emissions and allow for a comparison both on carrier and trade lane level. Air freight has a similar initiative within IATA, where they are working to build a similar kind of reporting structure that would allow for air freight carriers to provide information that is relevant to shippers to be able to calculate their carbon footprint. Trucking and rail is more of a regional specific because trucking is a bit more of a fragmented industry that requires a more close connection with the local providers. You will see here that this has been more driven in North America by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, which has an initiative called SmartWay. That is also an annual reporting scheme that then allows for a comparison between the carriers, the trucking carriers within North America. In the other regions, this has been a bit more of an industry-led initiative, starting with Green Freight Europe, which is then being expanded out to Asia, Latin America, India, and then hopefully places in Africa, Australia, until all of the trucking operations around the world are covered. For methodology, there are lots of different ways that you can calculate carbon, even though it is a pretty basic calculation. It is essentially cargo weight times the distance traveled times an emission factor. Emission factors are coming from these initiatives that I've just mentioned. But how you actually determine the cargo weight, how you determine the distance, if you don't know the exact routes traveled, that has a large impact on your final result. And therefore, there can be lots of different answers. Initiatives like the Smart Freight Center are trying to bring together these different ways of calculating all of the operations in your supply chain and provide a best practice set for shippers to be able to do these calculations. When it comes to carbon regulations, so far within the goods movement transportation sector, there is not a carbon regulation that has been applied in a tax or a cap requiring a reduction. This is being discussed for ocean and for air. It is being discussed on a country-specific level, such as in France. But these are still in development. If and when they come into force, it will add a cost to moving freight, very similar to what some of you may have seen with these low sulfur surcharges for shipping ocean containers. That is also from a regulation within the International Maritime Organization, and essentially the cost to use cleaner fuels that reduce pollution is passed on in the freight cost. So those are just a few of the very many drivers that go into why would a carrier be looking at improving their performance, why would a shipper be looking at integrating these concepts into their supply chain. And what I would like to walk you through next is the steps that we normally see companies go through when they are undertaking this journey. And when I say undertaking this journey, I do mean it as a journey. Most of the time, when I work with a shipper, they tend to be companies that have very strong sustainability programs already in place. They have resources, they have staff, they're already quite well versed in all the social and environmentally responsible aspects of sustainability. Logistics and transportation tends to be a step that these more mature, these companies that are more mature in sustainability take, because it's a bit more, it's conceived to be a bit more difficult. It's not actually. I personally think it's one of the more easier things to do, but it's a bit of an unknown. Most of the time these decisions sit within the logistics teams. That's a bit of a mystery to sustainability. The logistics managers think, oh, this is just something that ends up being one of those expensive, capital intensive, you're going to tell my operations what to do kinds of things. So therefore, it tends to be one of the things that comes towards the end or in a more mature cycle of sustainability development. When a shipper does start to look at these things, that is also a journey. And the journey starts first with actually linking the operational and sustainability performance. And that comes from deciding what part of your supply chain you would like to measure, what kind of data is meaningful for you, and how you need to communicate that within your organization. So this, you see on this slide that there are 3 steps, and one is data collection. And data collection can seem pretty straightforward. I know how much I shipped from point A to point B. I can give you that information and do the simple calculation of weight times distance times an emissions factor. What I find is that because shippers use so many different service providers, including some of their own contracts, that the information actually is sometimes a bit hard to align. So we do a lot of work to help streamline data management and to actually make sure that the data that is necessary is reported. Then we take that information and we actually map and model your supply chain. As I said, the distance And utilization factors and weight actually make quite a bit of an impact in that final number. So ensuring that your mapping and the modeling, the simulation of actually what is happening on the ground is as accurate as possible is a very important step. And then finally, we take that information and we generate the carbon calculations. Here, it is very important for you to understand you can report information in many different ways. I think the last time I counted, we've had shippers who have requested information in up to 25 different ways of looking at it. Normally, what I recommend is that you pick your top 5. You want to know things like what is my mode split? What are my carriers? Origin, destination, business unit. Have the reporting in a way that allows you to set KPIs based on those findings. So in this case, my belief is more data is not better. Less data that allows you to tell a clear story, allows you to do root cause analysis, that is the kind of information that will help you then do that final bullet point, which is identify efficiency improvements. As an illustration, how you use this data then to assess results. This is a high-level slide from a case study that we have with Marks & Spencer. If you're not familiar with the Marks & Spencer Plan A initiative, it is their sustainability strategy to become the world's most sustainable retailer. It has, I believe, 180 different ethical, environmental, and socially responsible points for which Marks & Spencer measures their performance against, including their transport and logistics. So what you see on this slide is Marks & Spencer is able to look at their information on a half-yearly basis and determine what their carbon intensity is against how much freight was moved. It also allows them to see what the impact of different operational initiatives, such as reducing air freight volumes, has had on their overall total. This information then can be used, as I said, to implement the operational changes. These operational changes generally fall into that logistics projects and not a sustainability project. But as I illustrated earlier, these are many times the same thing. On the left is a case study for improving container utilization, where we changed around the how full the containers are and what kinds of containers were being used. What you'll see here is that the operational, cost, and carbon impacts are all within the same percentages. This is connected to that, what I mentioned earlier about cost and carbon being a 1-to-1 ratio, where reducing cost 1% can reduce your carbon 1%, because if you're moving more goods in fewer containers, you're using less fuel. On the right-hand side, this is a case study of a modal shift from origin in Peru to North America. And in this case, what was happening is that the vendor was missing their deadlines, and the plan to ship ocean freight from Peru to North America could not actually happen because the goods were late from the vendor, and the only solution was air freight in order to make the delivery time. Danco worked with this customer to implement 2 solutions. The first was a temporary solution to do a shift to sea air so that the goods could go from Peru to Panama and Panama to North America and still make the delivery times, but be able to have a mostly ocean journey. The second was to work with the vendor and the customer to implement a vendor management program that allowed for the vendor to actually meet their agreed upon delivery dates, which then allowed for the original plan of shipping from all ocean from Peru to North America. And what you'll see here is actually the carbon impact was even greater than the cost savings, and that is because of the very high energy intensity of air freight. Once you have gone through the understanding of how your operations impact your carbon, where the carbon sources are coming from, and worked on projects to implement these operational efficiencies, your next step can be to change your procurement processes and how you assess your suppliers. This is an example from the Clean Cargo Work Group, which, as I mentioned earlier, allows for ocean carriers to report annually their carbon emissions on a per fleet and per trade lane basis. That means a shipper can compare two carriers, both overall and on trade lanes. You can take that one step further and also assess a particular supplier on their annual improvement. This will allow customers then to be able to say, okay, sustainability is now such an important part of my operations that I want carriers and suppliers that are partners in helping me meet these goals. And by changing your procurement, which I fully recognize is not an easy thing to do, and giving environmental considerations into your process and your annual assessments, that allows you to further deepen your sustainability journey and, again, find these partners that will support you. And then you can even go one step further, and these are examples that do have, they are capital intensive, they do have investments, but I do think they're really interesting examples of how companies have taken innovation and the logistics sustainability issue to a whole new level. On the top left, this is an example from Kroger, which is a company based in the United States and also has brands of Ralph's, Fred Meyer, and Food for Less. This is a food waste digester at their Compton, DC, that processes 150 tons of food waste every day and turns it into liquefied natural gas for their local distribution fleet. I think that this is just a really interesting way of not only dealing with waste that would go to a landfill, but also finding an alternative fuel source that is cleaner and saves the company money. On the middle to the right, this is the Nike warehouse, DC, in Willebroek, Belgium. You can see in this picture the wind turbines so that the facility can be powered by wind energy, and also that it is on a canal and can have barge shipments delivered instead of truck shipments, which is more environmentally friendly. And finally, at the bottom right is a truck developed by Walmart called the Advanced Vehicle Experience Concept Truck that has a number of different technologies, including microturbine hybrid engine and carbon fiber construction. So it's much lighter and energy efficient. So what I would ask for all of you who have just listened to my presentation is to think about how sustainability can improve your logistics operations, how you can use how you can use the carbon reporting to identify operational improvement opportunities, how you can use this to help your company understand that sustainability is not a scary thing that is going to constrain your operations and cost a lot of money, that it actually can be part of achieving better business and a better planet. And with that, we will have a Q&A session. As a reminder, you may submit your questions using the chat pane located at the bottom of the sidebar on the right-hand side of your screen. Please make sure to select Send Question to Staff before clicking the Send button. Good. Okay, so the first question that I see is, what is meant by sea air? And I apologize if I used a bit of logistics speak. Sea air is actually a combination of modes where part of the shipment is moved by ocean, so by sea, and part of it is moved by air. This is used when a shipment maybe needs to move faster than an all-ocean transport would, but it doesn't need to be immediate and doesn't need to be flown the entire way. Okay, the next question. How much CO2 does freight contribute to globally? That is a very interesting question. So as I said, ocean contributes to about the same amount as the country of Germany. But globally, all the different modes of transport contribute to 5.5% of the CO2 emitted every year on the globe. Okay, another question. How can mode-specific emission reports help improve operations? I've seen several shippers who have looked at their mode-specific emissions in this way. So when you look at the total emissions and the carbon intensity per cubic meter, for example, it actually looks pretty good. But when you start to look at what percentage came from truck, ocean, air, you may actually discover that, well, we're sending a lot of freight by air. We're sending 16% in a business model that doesn't require 16% of our shipments to be moved by air. So that will allow you to say, okay, well, why did that happen? Was there an issue with the supplier? Was there a product recall? Was there a weather event? Last year, you may have even said, was there a port strike if you were moving things to the U.S. West Coast? So this is how I encourage the shippers that do these carbon reports to actually use the information to help them to understand the efficiency of their operations. Are they making the right decisions? And they may be very valid reasons for why these decisions are made, and they may be the right ones. But I've often seen that this can be used as a leading indicator for changes that need to be made that were just not highlighted from other KPI reports, because they still may have been within their designated logistics spend, and they still may have been within, they've met all of their dates, they met all of their service levels, but you can see from the carbon report that actually things aren't moving as efficiently as they would like to be. So I have a question about how can I know more about these initiatives? Are there websites or books? Yes, there are many. I think One thing that you will receive after this webinar is the Clean Cargo Workgroup e-guide. This is actually something that was created by the shipper members of Clean Cargo Working Group and is meant to be a step-by-step handbook. I believe it's only 4 or 5 pages. We tried to keep it quite short, that actually allows a shipper to understand how do I even get started in this and what are some resources. Another place that is a good link to start is actually the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's SmartWay site. Has a lot of very good information on different modes, data sets, lots of things that sometimes it might be a bit too technical. It is the Environmental Protection Agency after all, but it is a really good resource. And then I would also encourage you to look at the new Smart Freight Center, which is based in the Netherlands. It's recently started last year, and also, again, has some good information. I do have a question about alternative fuel fleets and if Danco has worked on this in comparison to fossil fuel fleets. We have had some work in the United States using alternative fuel or hybrid trucks. Unfortunately, I can't say that I have all of the details on that right now. But again, what I would say is the majority of the benefit that I've seen and all of the opportunities have really been looking at the efficiency and reducing the waste. That actually has so much more of an impact on reducing your carbon footprint, that looking at alternative fuels has been something that has been a little farther out than most shippers that I've worked with have been ready to engage on. That said, it is there's a lot of technologies available, very different types of fuels that can be used, and they each have their benefits and their, not drawbacks, but considerations for operation. A project that I've worked on in the past was on electric trucks, which is a very interesting technology, especially in regions that have renewable energy as a power source. A consideration there is the distance or range of the trucks in terms of miles or kilometers that can be traveled before the trucks actually have to be plugged in again. Good. So that was the final question. We will reply to any unanswered questions via email after this webinar. And I would like to thank you very much for joining me today. And please note that this webinar has been recorded and will be made available for on-demand playback. And thank you again, and have a great day.